Welcome back to Tales of the 39, stories of a 39-year and running Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Today's story, like yesterday's story, goes back to my heady college days of the 1990s. And I was thinking about, the different stories that are coming up. And so tomorrow we're going to jump out of the 1990s because we've been in the 1990s for 2 days in a row. Tomorrow we're going to come back to, this decade, the 2020s. Back in the 1990s, D&D had just gone into second edition, and one of the second edition settings that had come out was Spelljammer. And, like it or hate it, whatever, Spelljammer, it is what it is. It's got its fans, it's got its detractors. But the way that Spelljammer works, a Spelljammer ship, which is a complete fantasy ship. I mean, you could enchant a pirate vessel, our matey, and just have it fly through the sky in D&D because it's fantasy. For the thumbnail, I used a little Star Trek reference for the video, and so it looks like the inside of a sci-fi spaceship. That's not really what ships are like in Spelljammer. It's fantasy. The thing that hooked me on Spelljammer, I am pro Spelljammer, was in the box set when I first got it home, and I opened it up. The first lines in the very first box set for second edition really sucked me in, because as a science nerd and everything, they went with, what if the workings of the universe, instead of being figured out by Galileo and Einstein and Copernicus, what if instead of being figured out by Galileo, Einstein, and Copernicus, what if they were figured out by Elminster, Mordenkainen, and Fistandantilus? So, Elminster, the premier wizard of Forgotten Realms, Mordenkainen, the premier wizard of the world of Greyhawk, and Fistandantilus, the predecessor premier wizard to Raistlin Majora, because I think Raistlin Majora would be the premier wizard, but Raistlin Majora deposed Fistandantilus, but that's neither here nor there. But, so what if the secrets of space and reality and how the universe worked, instead of functioning on science and scientific laws, the Einstein, Copernicus, Galileo, what if it had turned out to be discovered to be magical? So that kind of sucked me in. I will never forget that. That was some good writing to at least suck this D&D nerd in to Spelljammer. But in Spelljammer space, a ship drags an air envelope with it. And that air envelope is only going to stay fresh for so long. Eventually the oxygen is going to get consumed and replaced with carbon dioxide and stuff. And there are actually calculations, because D&D was more crunchy back then, as to how long the air would last and be good. And it was based on your character's size. Humans and elves and orcs and stuff, those are medium-sized creatures. And then, of course, anything smaller than that, your gnomes, your goblins, your leprechauns, your pixie fairies, they would use less. And anything bigger, your ogre, your half troll, or your half ogre, your troll, or whatever, some of the larger things that players could play, they would, of course, consume more oxygen. And so what a ship would do in Spelljammer is they would even just dip into the atmospheres of planets just to refresh the air envelope, just to let the old air envelope go away and refresh it. And there were some fancy magic items that you could get on your ship and kind of upgrade and stuff. One of the things that everybody wanted to have, it was kind of expensive, was you could get a cabinet in your ship, or built onto one of the walls of your ship, and that cabinet would open up to a dimensional gate to the plane of elemental earth. So, excuse me, not earth, air. Earth wouldn't make much sense. But you could get a cabinet that would open up to the plane of elemental air. And because it would open up to the plane of elemental air, it would just, opening up that cabinet just would instantly refresh your air envelope. But that was like an upper grade, getting a cabinet to the plane of elemental air, that was like an upper, super expensive upgrade for, the luxury ship or whatever, or when the party had gold to just sink into their ship to, trick it out and stuff. But most commonly, ships in Spelljammer space had an air envelope. and it would only last so long, and you just had to make sure that you refreshed the air before it got all stale and stuff. And the one night, the party had figured out that they were not going to get to the next planet before their air ran out, or their air went bad or stale, and that was a problem. And then after the party thought, and I just let it go. We had a discussion in yesterday's Tales of the 39 video about DM fudgery. And, I could have, if I believed in DM fudgery. We learned in yesterday's video that I don't. But if I believed in DM fudgery, then I could have just, they were just short one person. There was one too many people breathing air. So they were short enough air for one person. And suddenly this guy remembered that there was a vampire on board, an NPC. And he realized the NPC's name was Anton. And he realized that, hey, Anton doesn't breathe air. That takes care of our one person, and then the calculations turn out all right, and we will make it to the next planet in time. So Anton was there. What was he doing there? Well, Anton was a cleric, and in those days of first and second edition and stuff, D&D was not so class agnostic. And what I mean by class agnostic is it really mattered what class you were a lot more back then, because only clerics and druids and paladins could heal. Nobody else could really heal, at certain, these days, the way that they build things in more recent editions of the game, it's more class agnostic, and everybody can kind of do everything, like the utility character, James Bond character, whatever. But you had to have certain class balance back then, a lot more than you do these days. And nobody wanted to be a cleric. Clerics were not popular, but they were needed to be healers. So it was not uncommon. I did that for many, many, many years. As the DM, I'd just have an NPC cleric join the party. And they'd be an NPC party member because the party just had to have a cleric, or they wouldn't get heals. Because there was none of this long rest stuff. You had a cleric or a druid or a paladin or something, or there was no heals in the party. And so Anton was a vampire, and he was a cleric. And he was also there because in Spelljammer, the helmsman or helmswoman, helmsperson, the helmsman is when they power the ship, their magic gets sucked into the ship to power it. And so they lose all their spellcasting abilities until they rememorize more spells. They pray if they're a cleric, or study out of their book if they're a wizard, or whatever. Recharge if they're a sorcerer. But so nobody ever wanted to be the helmsperson. Nobody ever, wanted to sacrifice their spells to power the ship for a while. So Anton was doing two things. He was the NPC cleric, and he was the NPC helmsperson. And so, but he didn't breathe air. And so they just recalculated. Now, if I'd been just a fudgery DM, and if I had just, it's going to be okay, it's all for storytelling, then there wouldn't have been that brilliant moment when, the party thought and thought and thought for several long minutes as to what to do. They were all looking on their character sheets and looking at the magic items they had, looking at the spells they had, looking at the abilities they had, trying to think creatively, think outside the box. And there was just, hey, Anton doesn't need to breathe. And that was such a cool moment of somebody just naturally, organically figuring out a solution. So, and that wouldn't have happened if I would have just glossed it over with, DM fudgery. So that's today's Tales of the 39 about the vampire that didn't breathe air and saved the party because it made their air last longer. Tomorrow we will move on to a story much more recent from this decade, from the 2020s. We will see you next time on Tales of the 29.